So this is a picture of our current group, which is 40 of us in total at the moment. So what I'll be talking about is who 10 Ironwomen are, my journey to Ironman, and why gender equality in sport is so important, female participation in endurance and Ironman events, the barriers for women's participation in sport, experiences within our community, what we can all do to bridge the gap, and how you can get involved in 10 Ironwomen. Is that still sharing?
No, it's not sharing at the moment, Charlotte.
It's not? Okay, try that again. Is that working now?
Now we're good.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, who are 10 Ironwomen? 10 Ironwomen came together as a group of 10 friends, and they were all scared to do an Ironman alone. They were aware of the gender imbalance in Ironman, and it became clear that a community to bring together aspiring female triathletes was very much needed, and I can tell you it's still needed now. They wanted to complete their first Ironman together in order to understand how they could take their platform to the next level and support more women in this sport. We want to address the gender balance in the sport. Regardless of experience, age, geographic location, the idea is to increase all female participation in the sport. The more people we can get involved in this community, the more we can spread the word. We want to be able to enable people to join us to different degrees, whether that's entering their next Ironman, becoming one of the 10 Ironwomen, supporting us, doing their first 5K, joining us for training rides, Q&As, or anything. We're creating a platform so they can meet like-minded women and support us in our goal of reaching a balance of 50-50. One of the things that we talk about quite a lot is the actual name of the Ironman event. So I think in my past, like younger days, I've definitely heard of Ironman and never kind of imagined that a woman could do it. And I think speaking to a lot of people, we found that it puts the people off from even like trying to do it. So it's very excluding. So one of the reasons that 10 Ironwomen was called that was to stand against it. But we're very open to everyone and would really like to help create a welcoming space for LGBTQ+ community. So why this is about my journey to Ironman, just quickly. I've always commuted by bike, even like throughout university in my younger days. But I'd never done a proper long ride, probably like half an hour was my max. And then my brother got me a road bike in 2018. He'd done some cycling in France, and I was like, oh, it's quite interesting. So he got me a secondhand bike. And actually, when I got on it, I was really afraid. I felt like really shaky, had no idea how to control it, and the drops were something I was never going to touch. So he took me around the block a few times, and then I came back to London, which is very daunting. So I didn't take the bike out. And at the time, my friend Isla, who was on my university course, also got a road bike. I think she got an entry one from Decathlon, so it wasn't extortionate. And we were following an account called Twice the Health on Instagram, and I think they just started doing cycling, and they set up some female-only bike rides. So we thought, okay, we'll give it a go. Signed up together, and we went along, and it was really good because they had a faster, more experienced group, and then they had the novice group. So we turned up in kind of like our mismatched clothing, trainers, inexperienced on a road bike, and they led us through it, and we actually gained so much confidence just from one ride alone. And then I think on the second or third ride that was led, it was led by someone called Chloe Trigg, and she mentioned that she'd done an Ironman. So she's a personal trainer, she's a normal woman, and she was really relatable to us, and she just casually talked about it. She even mentioned that she got a bit stressed in the swim and was like doing a bit of breaststroke, and I think it just kind of like planted a seed there. And I think over a few months we're like, an Ironman, had a look at it, and then we were both procrastinating at Christmas from our exams and thought it'd be a good idea to sign up to an Ironman. So we signed up to our first ever triathlon, and it was the Staffordshire Half Ironman. We found a 24-week program online. It was free, and we just followed that. But it was really nice because we had each other to do that. So this is me through all my different stages, from my mismatched days of trainers up until the DIY Ironman. that we did in October when Ironman Barcelona was cancelled. And as you can see, it's really nice to have friends along the way. This was the half Ironman that we did from the 10 Ironwomen last summer, the only triathlon really allowed last year. So that was really good. So why is gender equality in sport so important? The United Nations has 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they aim to end poverty, protect our planet, and achieve equality for all people. And it's recognised that by improving at least one of these areas, others will also be affected. So if you improve equality for women, then you'll definitely have a knock-on effect on all the other areas. Equality in sport at elite level gives women and girls role models. This could be whether it's in pay, the course length. I think quite a while ago, girls weren't allowed to do the 1500 metre races, but now they are. Hard to believe now. Benefits and considerations in races. So now for the Ironman championships, women and men used to be on the same day, but now they're separate because the age group men were actually hindering the pro women. So that's why they're now separate. Equal airtime on broadcasting, the same rules. So things like at Wimbledon, men aren't penalised for changing their shirt on court, but women are. We all sweat. And we also want having inclusive culture in sports clubs with meaningful roles for women, leads by examples for other areas of life. So in addressing your gender equality issues. So that could be roles ranging from actually having female broadcasters, even if it's a men's football game. And also treasurers and your board chairs. So without any of these opportunities, you can't actually have any growth. So it will promote empowerment in education, communication, negotiation skills, teamwork and leadership, basically everything. And of course, it helps promote physical and mental health. So female participation in Ironman. If you don't know what an Ironman is, and it's not a bad thing not to know what it is, I didn't probably until about 2.5 years ago. It's a 2.4 mile swim, and then 112 mile cycle, and then a marathon at the end. And there's a cutoff for it, so it could be 16 or 17 hours depending on the course. And if you're a pro or you're top of your age group category, then you get to go to the World Championships, which is held in Kona in Hawaii. So when this first started in 1978, there were only 12 people who competed in the race. And then in 1979, we had the first Iron woman, who was Lynn Lemaire. And she was only one of 15 competitors actually starting the race that year. If you kind of go forwards a bit to 1986, that's when they started bringing in the prize money at Kona. And actually, triathlon has kind of been leading in the way for this because the pay was equal for men and women, and you rarely get that in sport. One of the issues, though, with Kona is that it used to be done on the pro places used to be done on kind of gender split. So men would get more places than women because it used to be like 10% of it. So if 60 men competed and 40 women competed, 6 pro men and 4 pro women would get a place, which is tough if you haven't got that many women competing. So now it's based on a point system, but men still get 15 more slots because they nearly double women in the numbers, as you can kind of see from this. And unfortunately, they have tried to change it, but the Ironman CEO, who's Andrew Messick, and the World Triathlon Corporation, who puts on Ironman, have said that by giving just 15 extra slots for the whole of the competition to pro women, you could lower the prestige of the World Championship if the pros were beaten by age groupers. One thing they also did was when they put the question to the pro athletes, they phrased it to the men as the men would lose slots in order for women to have more slots. But then they said to the women, they didn't mention about taking anything away from the women. So the women just thought it was about equality, but they sold it to the men as taking something away from the men, which already put it on the back foot. But they have created something called a Women for Tri program, and that's to increase female participation. So in 2019, they announced that 500 additional women would earn a place to race in the 2019 World Championships for the half Ironman. Ironman Staffordshire was one of those, so they got 25 extra places, and that has actually been increasing the rates. There's also something called 50 Women to Kona, which is trying to increase the number of women pros allowed. At the moment, they've seen an 18% increase in female participation, but still only 21% of the field. And actually one of the reasons that Staffordshire gets those extra places is because they have some of the highest female participation rates, and that's at 20%. So if 20% is one of the highest rates, we definitely have a long way to go. Interestingly, if you look at the British Triathlon memberships, they've only got 31.8% female membership, but this actually goes up to a split of 57 to 43 women to men, and that's in their tri-novice program. So women are interested in triathlon and they want to get into it. They just need a bit of help. I saw this yesterday, actually. I participated in the Dorney Standard Triathlon, and I thought there were more, but actually there were only 47 women out of 218 total participants. So really there are only 21.5% women there. Hopefully we can increase that. I think maybe if we got the whole of the Ironwomen group and other people, we could definitely do it. Okay, so female participation in endurance events as well. Just a broad spectrum here. So the Boston Marathon started in 1890 men only. In 1972, they officially allowed women to do the marathon, and now they've got over 12,000 women who are completing it as well. It's always been thought that men have several key physical advantages over women that make them have an edge at the elite level. And this could be things like height, weight, body fat, muscle, aerobic capacity and anaerobic threshold, but actually we're only just beginning to understand what women are capable of. And that's because a lot of the research was never actually allowed to be done on female athletes. It was always done on men. And if you think about it, it took 75 years for women to be allowed to compete in the Boston Marathon. So there's still a lot of research to be done. And we're actually only just starting to understand how women's physiology can affect them. So I think it's only in the last couple of years really that people are kind of starting to link up the menstrual cycle and performance and recovery and things like that. So we're only just starting to understand women. So a lot of the progress that's been made has actually been the natural result of women actually having a fair chance to compete. And then I've got a picture here of Jasmine Paris because she did something phenomenal. She won a 268-mile montane spine race along the Pennine Way, and she became the first woman to win it. And she actually broke the course record for men and women by an amazing 12 hours. And that was all whilst expressing breast milk for her baby at each aid station along the way. So I think that's pretty phenomenal for what women can do. So the barriers for women's participation in sport can be broken down into three main categories. That's practical, personal, and societal and cultural. In March, we actually asked our followers what they thought the biggest barriers were for women in running, and the most common response was catcalling and feeling safe on the streets. The other barriers that we need to consider are these three that I've got here. So the practical ones, women spend 3 times as many hours as men in unpaid care and domestic work. So this not only limits their access to decent work and potential of a better income, but it also limits the time they can put towards a chosen sport or exercise. During lockdown, this lack of time was heightened because public health restrictions meant that childcare centres and schools were closed, and people weren't out, families weren't always able to share care needs and responsibilities. So these extra hours of childcare responsibility had a tendency to fall on the mother, which meant that they weren't able to exercise much. Outside of the world of sport, women tend to earn less than men. It means that they might not be able to afford a club membership if there's, like running club costs or anything like that, pay for specific sporting equipment and clothing, race entry fees, or even childcare to actually let them take part in the sport. Sometimes not having what's deemed as a bike kit can also make you feel like an imposter. Personal safety on the streets, I think it's been quite a hot topic in the last couple of months. But actually it's always been an issue for women. It's only just kind of started to be highlighted. So this not only includes the streets, but also around sports and community venues. And in particular, it's especially a problem for women, but also some groups are more vulnerable than others. So that could be Black and minority ethnic groups might experience racist behaviour, and also people with disabilities can be disadvantaged and also face bullying and abuse. So travelling to and from venues for sports, going for runs or cycles as part of your training in the streets can actually result in harassment and sometimes worse. So this results in an overriding fear to go out alone and actually do something that you love and you really need. For funding, triathlon, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the minority sports that pay equal prize money. And in others, it's not always equal. So in order to have a good chance of succeeding, you do need to have the time and funding to chase that professional dream. You need to have the equipment. If you're going to be a professional athlete, you can't go out on a aluminium bike. You need your carbon bike and your carbon wheels. But if you're having to have another job to do that, then you're at a disadvantage to your opponents. And women's sport tends to attract less funding and sponsorship than men's. So that leads to poorer facilities, equipment and kit. And also just access to facilities. If you can't access them, then you can't improve. I distinctly remember I played netball at university, and we were a top team, performance team in Division 1, and we used to have our warm-up time cut short so that the men's volleyball team could have extra time, and they weren't even a performance team or high up. I think they're about the 3rd or 4th team, but our warm-up didn't matter for them. So it happens in all sports at all levels. But accessibility also means making it accessible for those with disabilities to join in, because they are just as capable as able-bodied people. The personal barriers that you can have, body image, so concern about body shape, size and athletic ability when it comes to performing physical activity. Recently, Sarah Voss from Germany covered her legs in an international gymnastics championship. This is usually only done for religious reasons, but by doing this, she actually just kind of set an example to other gymnasts, especially younger ones, who kind of, as they're growing up, are a bit more self-conscious. They're growing body hair, their body's changing. They might not want to wear the skimpiest of outfits. And so by doing this, they've shown younger ones that it's okay to wear this kind of clothing. And her teammate actually said, there's no risk of revealing anything by accident, which is actually quite a concern sometimes. So also periods. When you're growing up, your body starts going through all kinds of changes, physically, hormonally, and at any one time, 20 to 25% of women of childbearing age may be on their period. So this means that they need to change their tampon, their pad, empty their moon cup, whatever they use. And in order to do that, you need a bathroom or something with a sanitary bin. But according to the UN, 1 in 3 women actually lack access to safe toilets. So this is an incredible barrier. And also if you're on a race, like an Ironman or whatever, it's quite difficult if you have to wait for a portaloo at whatever mile or in a transition zone between a 112-mile cycle to go and change your pad or something. PMS also affects 90% of women, but it's chronically understudied. It can include anything from breast tenderness, which you can imagine would affect running, stomach pains, sleep disturbance, headaches, bloating, mood swings, and anxiety. It doesn't mean that you get every single one of those, you might only get one. But I'm sure you'll all agree that even having one of those would definitely affect either your performance or your recovery. Period pain has also been described as almost as bad as a heart attack. So if you're trying to do anything too much, you might not want to. And especially if that's happening every month. Clothing and equipment can be expensive. There are definitely ranges out there. You could go for Decathlon at the lower end range, but you've also got Rafa. And I think there's also a tendency for people to be like, you have to have the best, or you have to have all the gear, but actually you don't. If you want to be a cyclist, all you need is a bike. You could rent a Boris bike for a day and you'd be a cyclist. You don't have to have a 15 grand carbon bike to be a cyclist, and you don't have to look like one either, because all you need is a bike to look like a cyclist. Or a runner, you just run. But with the clothing and equipment, it's not just the cost, it's also what it looks like. So it could be too revealing. For religious reasons, you might not be able to wear just a swimsuit to a swimming pool, and you also might not be able to swim with men. So that can be an issue. And if a pool doesn't allow someone to wear a t-shirt or something to cover up their body for a bit of modesty, then that just excludes them from swimming. Also, equipment can be inappropriately sized because mostly it's designed for men. So if you've got a smaller woman who's 5'2" with your smaller hands, she's not necessarily going to fit a bigger bike or be able to hold it, other sporting equipment that's designed for a man. And personally for me, I am a 6-foot woman, so unsurprisingly, not many clothes from women fit me. And I've also got size 10 feet, so I find it very hard to find netball trainers, which is a stereotypically tall sport, but apparently you can't get them. And even just things like having, I think I just skipped the slide. I did. Size that they say they're a large, but actually really they're a 10. So if someone's trying on clothes for that sport, they can feel like they've failed or they're not the right size for that sport. And also having good parental and adult influence. It's important to have a role model. So I'd never heard of triathlon until I really came to university and got the first road bike and joined all those groups. I'd only ever seen, I think, the Brown-Lee brothers once and didn't really know what it was. So it's important to have role models and coaches and adults that these children can see, but also to kind of remember that negative comments from coaches and people can actually discourage girls from taking part in sports. Similarly, if a parent's only interested in their child winning, that can make it very stressful for them to take part. So it's important not to overpressure them. And friendship groups, I think anyone who's trained for a marathon or anything really, or an Ironman event, can agree that it takes a lot of time, and you might not want to drink or go out too late in the week going up to an event, and it can be quite difficult to keep up with social events or even keep up your sport if your friends aren't supportive or you don't have friends within that group. So I think if you have to get up for a 6 o'clock cycle to fit in your training around work, your friends might not appreciate that. Or even if you'd like to go for a sunrise cycle or go for a 5.5 training ride or a 2.5 run on a Sunday, they might not appreciate it, or the fact that you're not spending much time with them. So it can be difficult to keep that going and your friendships. And I think sometimes people feel they have to choose between the two. So the solutions to these that I've got, we need diverse pathways to increase female involvement. So women aren't a one uniform group. There's different barriers for everyone. For instance, a white able-bodied woman from a middle-class family is going to have different barriers to a woman of colour or from a working-class home or with a disability. Similarly, different age groups will have problems. So a younger person might not have the parental support, so they can't buy the equipment to do the sport or get someone to take them to an event. An older person might have a bit of an arthritic knee. We all have our issues. It's important that people see people from their own background, from like what they look like, or similar beliefs, families, countries, anything, so that they can, you have to see it to believe it, basically, or be it. We need athletes to have equality in all areas, so sponsorship, media opportunities, prize money, and access to races. Subsidies for women's sport and childcare facilities would also be good. So if you're going to create a club, maybe you have someone who doesn't mind sitting out once a week or for part of the session to watch the children if they do need to bring them, or include the children if it's a track session or something like that. If you are going to start a club or anything like that, do a safety assessment of venues. Is it a well-lit area? Are there security cameras? What can you tell your participants that they will be safe and that you're monitoring it? And have a way that they can report something if they feel that maybe one member of the group is quite threatening to them. Gendered sports sessions are also a great idea. The sorry. The swimming pool near me in Elephant and Castle on a Thursday does a women's only swim session, and that's great. They usually have a female lifeguard, and women are able to swim in their hijabs and everything like that. So it's really inclusive for them. And they put the blinds down as well, so no one can see in the pool. And it's important to ensure that all of your coaches and everyone have the correct training so that they can work effectively with people with disabilities. And also just check privacy in changing facilities and access to toilets with sanitary bins. Does the venue that you're holding your sessions at have that? Is there, a park toilet nearby that's a safe park toilet? Have those facilities. So the societal and cultural barriers, it's quite a male-dominated cultural sport. You can see here that this is just one of the basketball examples that I found quite stunning. You've got LeBron James and Sue Bird. They've both got the same amount of seasons, both the same number of championships, but their salaries are disgustingly different. So you've got the, within your sports or in society in general, you've got attitudes and prejudice. So women's sport especially, things like your male dominated ones like football and rugby, they're still regarded by some as fundamentally unfeminine. Just going to mute myself whilst I cough. Okay, fundamentally unfeminine, and it's also wrong and unfortunate, but there's a stereotype that lesbians are also regarded as unfeminine, and I think I've heard quite a few insults put out there that these conclusions are that all sportswomen are lesbians, especially people who are into things like CrossFit or bodybuilding or anything like that, and in football. And I've even found it at university as well. And so the kind of discrimination here can actually lead to women not taking part in these sports because they don't want to be seen as unfeminine or lesbian, and actually it's an insult to all of that. But it can also lead to parents discouraging their children. I don't remember any, from doing football or rugby. And it's still a thing when girls go to university now, they say, I don't want to be part of that team. But it can also lead to people not wanting to reveal their sexual preference publicly, which they don't have to. But the reason that they might not want to do it is because they're worried about the prejudice that they could get. A brand could drop them or lose funding, something like that. For disability venues, they're not always accessible. They might not have a ramp, they might not have a disabled toilet. And you might have coaches who don't know how to adapt their teaching. And also have unwelcome attitudes of other sports participants, and also a lack of role models is a massive barrier. Also, assumptions about ethnic groups and a lack of representation can limit opportunities to participating in a range of sports, even if it's something as simple as having a swimming hat that can fit your hair into. And also talking of representation, Sika Henry here is the first professional Black triathlete, which I'm amazed at why that's only just happened. The internationals up here, if you follow them on Instagram, this is their handle. They posted how they were excited to watch the 2021 Tour de France route presentation, and they were hoping for more news on women's cycling, and all they got was 31 seconds dedicated to women's cycling in the hour-long presentation. So that was 0.9%, which is shocking. And actually this year's La Course, which is the female equivalent of the Tour de France, is just stage 1 again, and there's no further details of what's going to happen in 2022. So there's still an increasingly, there's still female invisibility. So in our job roles, media representation and everything. In 2018, it was seen that women's sport coverage failed to achieve above 10% of all sports coverage, and that was within 5 countries at least being monitored. So in 2000, the Olympics showed, I think it was in Australia, wasn't it? Showed the first appearance of triathlon, and actually the response from that can show that if we do have coverage, it increases it so much. So I think they had 111 million people tuned into that, and actually after that there was a boom in participation in triathlon. We want to have, by having a lack of kind of female participation and representation on boards as well, that can really put you on the back foot. So the British Triathlon Board actually now has 33% women, whereas the Triathlon England management has 60% women, and then higher up they've got a 50-50 divide between the genders on the board, so they are improving in that, which is good. This is just kind of more of the barriers that we're told about, and it's quite frustrating when you do a sport and you don't feel safe when you're told about it. So this is when people say there's no barriers. If you're told to do all of these, it can kind of limit when you're what you're able to do and when you're able to do it. So share your live location, run fast to get away, don't run in a sports bra. In this weather, that's very hard, and you can get shouted at just for doing that. Changing your route, don't wear shorts, and don't run at night, and don't run alone, things like that. And just people making negative comments. I think it's quite a common thing at the moment. So I've just got some experiences. I say experiences. These are just some comments that we've come into along the way. One of the girls is talking about competing in an Ironman, and someone's like, "Oh, what's the distance the ladies run?" And she's like, "Oh, it's the same as the men's." And he's a bit, "Oh, didn't know that." And then someone else said, "Oh, they still call it Ironman when women do it too." I'm very shocked. And actually, my friend Isla, someone said to her, a guy that we both know, is like, "Oh, I can imagine Charlotte doing it, but not you." He thought I looked a bit more athletic than her. I fit the mold. And then another one of our girls got told, "Oh, that's not a bike a woman should be using, especially on the roads." And the ironic thing was that it was a live road bike, so it's especially designed for women and for road use. I've got something that we did post about a while back, was from one of our Ironwomen, Hilby, and I do have her permission to share this, and it was just when she was out for a training run. And so she wrote, "How many of you have been followed home sometime? I know it happens, but I thought it would never happen to me, as if I was immune somehow. I always thought, who the hell would be interested in following me? As the streets are emptier, and as already marginalised people continue to suffer even more, there might be more manifestations of antisocial behaviour and a bigger need to stay aware of your surroundings. I hope everyone stays naturally safe out on walks, rides and runs, but it's good to have some plan if you get caught off guard and stop feeling safe. I was followed by the same man riding a bike on 2 runs this week, and the second time really shook me, as if I just couldn't get rid of him. Even though I made some unhelpful route choices, like quiet roads, in my anxiety, I was lucky to find 2 people on a walk who agreed to accompany me homewards. I didn't run with my phone because I mostly never do. Probably mistake number 1. I got amazing support from so many friends and the 10 Ironwomen community as soon as I got home. Here's some collective advice in no particular order. 1, stay calm, don't push away your gut feeling. 2, ask for help. 3, consider always carrying your phone or an alarm or similar. 4, file a report, no matter how silly you might feel. Do it for the others out there who might be more vulnerable than you. 5, try to memorize as many helpful identifying details as you can, or if you have a phone, grab a picture. Always tell someone you're going out and share your live location on WhatsApp or Strava. Have a private profile though, and you can block your home route. And change your routes and routines. And in these quiet times, try not to go out when there's no one around. I'm sure there are so many more things we could list, and remember this is very much an intersectional issue. I'm waking up to the importance of community in so many different ways. Can't wait for laughs with friends on group runs and rides again soon. And we kind of thought that had stopped for a while. And then yesterday or today, there was a post from a woman who had been followed by a man in a van. And so she's actually taken a photo of that van and sent that to the police. And I think it's very important to remember to try and do that, or at least get someone to take the photo for you if you're nearby someone. But those are just kind of some of the barriers and comments that we've come up to along the way. So what can we all do to bridge the gap? Take the plunge is the first step. Just go for it. This is some of our 10 OG 10 Iron women going into the sea at Ironman Barcelona last year. So take the plunge, attend a meetup. So sign up to a 5K, half marathon, sprint, tri, or an Ironman, just anything you want to, even if it's the virtual one. You can go along with a friend or on your own. My friend Ida and I actually went to some talks about women in Ironman, and they were free events put on by the Giant store in Camden, and we saw normal, relatable women talk about their Ironman journey, and that was great. We also went along to rides, which were put on by Twice the Health. So that was an introduction and a safe and supported gateway into road cycling, and that's currently got me to the situation where I am now. Some might want it, some might not. Create events, taster sessions, and socials as a group. So with 10 Iron Women, we've had groups and socials before COVID, you know, meeting up to chat about events. They've done things with Lululemon and for Adidas, where people can just come along and ask questions. We've done cycles to Cambridge, to Windsor Park, and group runs as well. So if you do those, it's really important that you remember that the time and energy that you can give someone can help them develop massively, not only in their skill, but in their confidence, and they can carry it forwards to others. Be visible. Be a relatable role model. It's one of the single most powerful vehicles for us to showcase how sport can create an inclusive environment for all. Be proud and talk about your ambitions and achievements. I think sometimes it's really easy to say, oh, it's just a 10K, oh, it's just a 5K, oh, I was really slow on that run. Just remember that what might be your slow could also be someone's fast, or their dream, their goal. But also you need to celebrate your own achievements because you're doing so well. Don't judge. There's no specific look for a runner, a triathlete, or a sports person. We all start somewhere. At Dorney Triathlon yesterday, it was great to see so many people of like different levels. And there were people doing breaststroke. Normally you would expect people to do front crawl, well, that's what you'd assume, but they were doing breaststroke, having a great time, finished the whole triathlon. There were people who wore trainers on the bike rather than cleats, and there are people in t-shirt and shorts rather than a tri-suit. So you don't have to wear lycra all the time to do everything. And there was actually one man with panniers, which was a great sight. So make some noise. If you spot someone on Instagram, they don't have to be a pro athlete, they could be anyone. Just share their story, share their accomplishments, tell people, like whoever will listen, tell them about it. Create an open and safe space for discussion, whether that's within a small friendship group, a bigger one, or even if you create a Facebook group for some people to join, could be strangers. We have a 10 Iron Women WhatsApp group for the 40 of us. We share thoughts, experiences on there. All opinions are listened to. We never tell someone that they're wrong or that opinion's not okay. We discuss it, and that's great. And we just share tips and tricks as well. If you see inequality or you don't think women are getting enough airtime in sport, do something about it. That could be signing a petition, sending a letter to whether it's to a broadcasting channel or anything like that, just to highlight the issue. And if you spot unhelpful attitudes, call them out. And this includes your own attitudes. So question how you can adjust your thinking. For example, the language that we use, and I'm definitely guilty of this, like shouting, come on girls, that women are often referred to as girls. And as professional women, we're quite often given the title of wife or mother, rather than doctor or, you know, lawyer or something like that. And yet men aren't referred to as boys, husbands or father. It's always their name or, you know, man. And listen to us. If we say something happened, listen to us, believe us, support us, and ask what we need. Even if it's just you to be silent and just kind of nod your head. And report it. If harassment is grossly underreported, if you spot it or you're on the receiving end of it, report it, no matter how small you think it is. One of our 10 Ironwomen has actually written to her local council because the beach bin men catcall her every Friday morning on her run. So she's written a letter and just waiting to hear back from that. But it's good that she's written the letter just to kind of start the motions. How you can get involved with 10 Ironwomen. You can follow us on all kinds of social media. We're very active on Instagram. Tag us in your rides or your training, whatever you're going to share. We're on Facebook as well, the community, lots of people kind of talking about events that they signed up to, asking for information. We've also got a new website, so you can sign up to our newsletter on there, see about events that we've got coming up. So this was actually yesterday. The girls met up for a run and a picnic in the park, which was really nice. This was a couple of weeks ago. We cycled to Cambridge and went to the Lido there with Pilvi. This was one of the Lululemon events, I think, last year or the year before. Went for a run, had a chat with the OGs, kind of found out about their Ironman journey. And this was from the same event. And you can also join our events. We do a weekly morning ride on Zwift at 7 in the morning if you are an early riser. We've got webinars. We've been invited to do events like this, and we also do Zoom, so we've done a few Zoom yogas and things like that, and obviously our in-person meetups. And also feel free to privately message any of the personal accounts of 10 Ironwomen or the main account, because I'm sure we'll also reply to you all. Okay, so I just thought I'd share my final thoughts. So this is what I thought after finishing the DIY Ironman. Your mind's incredible. It can make you sign up to do an Ironman having never run a marathon. You can cope with the uncertainty of the pandemic. It can persuade you to get up at 6 AM to train, even if it's cold and dark. It can make you feel nervous on the day. It can allow you to enjoy the experience. It can put you through dark moments, definitely at 11 o'clock at night when it's pissing down with rain. But it can also bring you through those dark moments, and it can give you that boost to the finish line. So these are just some of the photos from our DIY event in Brighton, and the OGs even created our own Ironman finish line, and we had our medals as well, which is so great, and our support crew. So we're a great community to join if you want to. And I'm hoping that this will work. Does the sound work for that?
Can't hear the sound.
What about us?
Okay.
I think it's coming through now.
They said. What about us? Yes. You're here too. And we've been here just as long as you. They said it's just a name. There's no more to it. We know better. We understand the power. It's a privilege to be what you can see. This change has reached some of us. Many still ask. What about us? What about they, them? This book. No, not yet. What are we here for? Not for you. Our challenge isn't a race. There's no competition. It's working for the person who feels too far away. Taking the people away. I'm curious. We're strong, resilient, kind, supportive, brave, and fearless. Ambition, courage, and determination. We dream and we believe. see yourself in us? In us. Can you see yourself in us?
Okay, so that was something we did for International Women's Day, and I just thought it would be nice to share. And these are just some useful books and accounts that I follow. So Invisible Women actually just brings together a range of case studies, stories, and research from across the world that illustrates hidden ways in which women are excluded from the building blocks of the world we live in. It's actually very interesting, quite a shocking read. Then you've got Raw by Dr. Stacey Sims, and it's a comprehensive, just kind of physiology-based nutrition and training guide specifically designed for active women, because there's not much research into that. So if you are interested in kind of how to train and recover, that's really good. And also, just in case anyone was interested in doing an Ironman, this is the book that we've all followed. You don't have to follow that book, but it's actually quite nice because it does it on time rather than distance, and just kind of breaks everything down for you. And there's a just finish, an intermediate, and a competitive program. And then these are some accounts that I follow for inspiration. And that's it. Stop sharing that.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. First of all, I just want to say thanks for taking the time to put that together and gracing us with your presence. It was really insightful, and I definitely learned a lot in there. And you know, one of the things I saw about the women, 60% of the board are women, so that's definitely a step in the right direction. But obviously, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And I think what Ironwomen are doing is really inspirational. And I think I've said it before that, you know, I fully expect you guys to inspire a generation with the good work that you guys are doing, and it will happen. And you mentioned about the smaller races where you went to the one on Dorney. You mentioned there's about 40-odd women there in a race of about 200, was it? Or just over? So, you know, if you guys descended on that, how amazing would that be? And I think, you know, you guys are going to get there. You guys are doing amazing work. You've got a great following, but obviously you need support. It's not just you guys. You're obviously there, but others can help. And a lot of things need to change in the sport itself and the biases that are out there. And yeah, I just want to say thanks for just shining a light on all of that. You know, we've done a talk previously on violence against women. So to us, it's like there's a lot of social injustices going on in the world, and if we could just highlight some of those, and you know, educate ourselves as well as individuals, as men as well, and try and do better ourselves is one thing that we definitely look at Be More You. And just trying to support the good work that people like yourselves are doing. So obviously we want to take this video that we recorded today and share that online as well, try and get more people to see this, get them, educate more people as well. But what I'd like to do now is just perhaps open it up to any questions that anyone might have. So whether you want to put that in the comments box, or if you just want to speak out loud now to Charlotte, please do.
Yeah, I've got a comment and then a question. Thank you so much, Charlotte. It's been, yeah, a really, really good talk and amazing to hear about everything you're doing. Firstly, a comment was just one of the first things you said about when you started cycling, and it was just so comforting to hear, because personally I'd, apart from a little bit at uni, and I joined a tri club and didn't have a bike myself and didn't know what I was doing and didn't have much confidence, and then left it all behind and didn't get on a bike again, like a road bike especially, until I moved to London until the pandemic, because I'd kind of had to, and I'd been so scared to cycle in London, and I don't feel like I'm always like quite a confident person. It was just one thing I just couldn't bring myself to do, and then it's like been my way into cycling, and I've suddenly, yeah, so it's just, but it was just really comforting to hear that you're doing what you're doing now, and you hadn't before that. I'd also, you know, had that experience. So thank you. And then a question it's actually something that's come from a friend who is actually training for an Ironwoman at the moment, and she knew this talk was happening tonight, couldn't join, and it was to do with, yeah, she was just asking about like menstrual cycle and training, and it's something she doesn't feel confident finding out about much. She's like, do you train through it? What's your advice? Are there any good resources that you use to figure out what the best way to train is when you're on your period, and she was just asking if there's anything. But I'm also obviously very interested as well.
So I just train through it. So some people will actually take a contraceptive pill or something to delay their period so they don't get a period during race. I think there's maybe some more data coming out now that says it might actually be beneficial to keep your period because your hormones fluctuate throughout, but you might feel that you're more kind of hungry during specific parts of your period. I have a Garmin watch, and actually it's got a period tracker on there, so it can tell you when you're due, and it also gives you tips or like information like I might be sweating more at the moment because I'm in my luteal phase, or I'm a bit more hungry at this moment, or get more sleep for more recovery. And actually this might be a bit too much for information for people, but I've had my period on I think 2 out of 3 of the half Ironmans that I've done. Wore a moon cup for all of it and it was fine. It didn't affect me. I think I maybe took a couple of paracetamol at the time, but I'm still really happy with my performance and actually improved each time. So yeah, and I think the Raw book by Stacey Sims actually kind of talks about that. And also there's apps called Fitter Women, FITR, and that they look a lot about physiology and periods and things like that.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, would anyone else have any comments or ask any questions? Please feel free to do that. Or you can put your hand up. Everyone's been a little bit shy, are they?
If everybody else is going to be shy. One of the bits you covered off was like the representation and coverage of like women's elite sport versus men's elite sport in like media coverage. Like, how do we go about changing that? Do you think it's like it's part of it's about even just actually making the effort to actually watch it in the same degree that you might watch like I mean, like I'm a Spurs fan and I watched like Spurs team, the men's team. Is it something where like just people making the effort to actually say, right, I'm going to seek out and watch the women's team as well is going to help change the commercial dynamic?
Yeah, I think viewing numbers is probably definitely a big driver for things like this, and also just talking about things. I remember, I think in Wimbledon, the women never used to really get that much centre court time, and now there was a lot of talk about it, and it's kind of women do get more centre court time. And I think maybe even like talking to friends. I remember with kind of football showings, I don't follow it, but I remember there's always a massive kind of uproar about women's football and rugby not being given enough airtime, and actually people saying it's boring to watch. It might be an unpopular opinion, but I think the women's football is probably less time on the floor clutching a knee than the men's, which might give more match time. But yeah, I think just if you give people a chance, it'll give them an opportunity to grow and have the equal opportunities, really.
I'll say one thing about that, which I've really noticed has changed in like the last 2 years or so. There's been like in terms of like commentators and stuff just on like BBC or on 5 Live or whatever. They have like ex-women's pros and things, as well as like the ex-men's pros, just like not, and just commentating on like Premier League games or whatever. It's really kind of like just, this is someone who is an ex-professional footballer and knows the sport. So I think it's kind of like, it's obviously it's nowhere near enough, but just like seeing it changing, and kind of like there's been a couple of female like match officials in the Premier League as well. So hopefully it keeps moving that way.
Definitely, yeah.
In relation to that, Matt, the I don't know if you've noticed on the Euros, one of the half-time groupings was two women. I think Alex Scott, and there's a lady that used to be like pitch side at West Ham. So it's definitely getting there. And also, I think, yeah, when I renewed my West Ham season ticket, they had like a documentary on BBC talking about women's football, showing the kind of behind the scenes. And when I renewed my season ticket, it actually said, would you like to be given information about the women's team season ticket? And they're going to contact for more information. So it is getting there, just not enough. But like you say, I think if as a society we do more and we publicise things more and we bring our female children up to, you know, like football, like other sports, not be ashamed to, you know, do those heavy-handed things, then maybe it will get there. I mean, I was told I couldn't play in the netball team when I got to secondary school because I was a boy. I was the star player in primary school. So we need to kind of eradicate these social norms. But yes, thank you, Charlotte. It was amazing. Just leaving me hanging here, everyone. This is on record. Come on.
I just wanted to add something about the women's sport coverage thing that might be quite an interesting thing. Once upon a time, I worked at a sports media insight agency, which is fascinating when it comes to data, but it also highlights that there's a bit of a vicious cycle with women's sport coverage, in that if women's sport doesn't get coverage, it's a real struggle for them to secure good sponsorship deals, because a lot of the big money in sports and sports media is attached to like how many seconds of a brand is shown on sport programming, or how many times a brand is mentioned in relation to a sporting event, whether that's the sponsor of a team, the sponsor of a venue, or even like the sponsor of a particular event, track, or sort of platform or whatever. So there's a huge like vicious cycle going round. You can't get the sponsorship, they don't get as much airtime, and then we still see less representation, and it's really frustrating to watch.
Is there anything which you think would like really help like break that cycle? Because you've had the experience and it's just like,
I don't necessarily have the answers. It's been a while since I worked in that field, and the like I said, it's fascinating stuff, but it's also not an area that I'm still in. I do think that some sports, and certainly the last couple of times I've been to Twickenham, England Rugby are doing a really great job of trying to encourage people to watch both live and other versions of the English women's rugby team, because they make it a bolt-on to the match. So rather than having to buy a separate ticket or go to a separate venue, you can actually watch the women's fixture straight after the men's fixture, and you can stay on, which is a really great way to kind of hook people in, because you've already got people who are clearly interested in sport. So if you can keep them there and keep them interested, that can be a really great way.
Well, I think we've got time for one or two more questions or comments, if anyone wants to jump in.
I have a question. I used to be really into racing triathlon. Actually, I did a lot of half Ironman racing when I lived in the US, and yeah, it always really frustrated me. And this like cliche of like the Iron Widow, because the husband is off racing, but like there wasn't the Iron Widower, you know, like there was never like the guy cheering for the, you know, the women out racing and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of this really spoke to me. My question is, if Charlotte, if you have like any specific examples of like ways to encourage women to just go for it, because I feel like women still kind of stop themselves. And I mean, they see I have friends who have seen things that I've done or see things that other women are doing and say, oh, I'd really like to do that. Oh, but no, I could never do that. I could never do that. And so there, even if you're, if you can see it, you can be it, and trying to be a role model and trying to be positive and encourage and things like that, there's still an instinct in a lot of women that I've encountered that still kind of stops themselves, or there's some kind of barrier. So I was just curious if you had any words about ways to encourage to get around that.
I would say just kind of ask them why, kind of just listen to them, and if they say, oh, I can never do it, just say, well, why couldn't you do it? And if they say, oh, I could never run 5k, just say, if we did something every day, just like a little bit further every day, you could run, walk, you could get to that 5k at some point. And it's the same with, I'd never run a marathon before. I still only ever run one, and that was in Brighton on the DIY day. And I had so many times when I doubted myself and whether I'd be able to do it. The first time I ever ran, I've never been a runner. I've never liked running, I won't lie. The first time I did a half marathon, I think it was 2 hours 45. And I was too petrified to train and do it. And I just assumed that my friend's mum wouldn't pick me up in the day and I wouldn't have to do it. And she did. So I had to do it. And then I didn't run apart from on the netball court, which is just, I was stuck to 1/3. And I didn't run probably for about five years. And then we signed up to that half Ironman. And I really surprised myself. If you go out 3 times a week, if you just commit to a session, you'll get better. It doesn't matter. You don't have to compare yourself to anyone else's speed. And not even really to yourself. You don't have to kind of do the same half marathon pace that you did last year. Just kind of do it on how you feel. Just surprise yourself. You do like 10.1k. Just kind of enjoy the process and go with it. Yeah. And just kind of say you'll do it with them. We've got a little cycling group between 5 of us from uni, and one of them's like, oh, I can never do a triathlon, I can't swim. And I was like, oh, well, there's a sprint one that's only 750 meters, we can go to the pool together. And that's what we did. And then she signed up to a sprint, so she's doing that in September with me. And you just say, I'll be there with you, I'll come and support you. And I think that will just make them feel safe, and they've got a friendly face on the course. So yeah, I hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got a question for you, Charlotte, on a personal level. So Ironman, you obviously done the DIY. What's your goal, your objective personally when it comes to doing these crazy competitions and races?
So I think, lost my elbow. I sometimes come up with the goal and then say, actually, I don't have a goal. And I never tell anyone. I'm like, oh, I might want to do 6 hours or 6.5 hours, and then just set a goal. So I think I always want to either get the same or maybe a little bit better, whether it's kind of getting 30 kilometers an hour on the bike section, or doing the swim in under 40 minutes. I just set a time for when I'd like to do it, and then I'm pleasantly surprised if I manage to go further than that. For Barcelona, the actual real day, I'd actually just quite like to not die on the course, because for DIY we didn't have time transitions or anything like that. And I'd quite like to do a marathon before then, just so that in my head I know I can do it again. But yeah.
And when things start getting really tough, how do you find a way to motivate yourself to keep going? Because I watch these amazing women do the Ironman. I know you've done the DIY one, but if you're going to set a goal as well, you're going to go and do a big one. How do you motivate yourself when it gets really tough, like you did the DIY? What do you dig into?
So I like to listen to music when I'm training, and there's probably a few songs that I really know if they come on, I'll push myself a bit further, and I actually just end up humming that in my head and kind of find myself breathing to it. So you'll just hear me panting vaguely to like the rhythm or like the tune of Tidal Wave. That can be a bit disconcerting. In the swim, I just it can be a bit intimidating with people swimming across you or into you, or like having a foot to the face or losing your goggles. So I just kind of count my strokes, and it's almost like a meditation kind of form if you take away the other swimmers. But actually, if you're cycling up a really steep hill, kind of hating yourself at the same time, you can just kind of count like 10 pedals like when you're stood up on the bike and then 10 down, and just for me numbers seem to work. And then just kind of focus on the run, just say, oh, I've done 10k, 10 more k, it's fine, you can do that. Yeah.
Great. I've got a last question. What's the most common question that comes to Ironwomen, like from women that want to join? Is there a common question?
Do any of the OGs have an answer for that one? I can't really think of. I think, like, can you really do it? Do you have one, Freya?
I was just going to say, I think most people are just scared of the bike. That seems to be the most terrifying element. But I think we've all found that just cycling with people is such a huge help. I know that I relied on Elena to get me into cycling, and I forced her to chaperone me to every group ride because I was so scared, but got there eventually. So yeah, I think that's often the most common fear for the Ironman.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, if anyone's got another last question before we close it off, now's a good time. Maybe Sarah, did you want to say something perhaps? You know, you've been there.
I think Charlotte's done a great job. But yeah, thanks so much for joining. And I suppose if any of you know anyone who might want to get into triathlon or you think could be tempted to do an Ironman, please point them in our direction. The more the merrier.
Oh yeah, we're hoping to enter a race with a 50-50 gender split in 2023. So
yes, so we need everyone to tell all their friends, because that's a lot of women that we're going to need to do a race. So spread the word. Definitely,
anything we can do to help, let us know. We'll definitely be keen to support it and push the word out. Okay, thank you for taking the hot seat today, Charlotte. You've been amazing. I've really enjoyed it. We've all enjoyed listening to you and hearing the journey and everything that's going on around Ironwomen and the inequality in the sport and what needs to change. I've definitely learned a lot and been inspired, and I'll definitely take it upon myself to do what I can in the small part that I can play. And yeah, we'll keep an eye on Ironwomen. We'll keep on supporting from near and far. And yeah, wish you all the best of luck with everything that you guys are vying for, especially the 50-50 gender split in a couple of years. And definitely looking forward to coming on one of the next missions soon. So thank you all and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Charlotte.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Really good, Charlotte. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.